The Nomad is a starter ship Oster Citizen. Released in version 3.11 in 2020, it is the second major ship release from Consolidated Outland. With its unique design, the goal of the Nomad was to offer an affordable, versatile ship built with cutting-edge technologies. But has Consolidated Outland achieved that? Hi, I'm Joro5, and in this video I'm going to tell you what I like, what I don't like, and what I will do to improve the Nomad. If you're not familiar with the concept of starter ship, I suggest you first watch my Drake Cutter video linked in the description, which provides some useful insight into the topic. In short, starter ships are ships that meet the following criteria: affordable price, no larger than size 3, versatility and balanced performance. The Nomad stands out from the other starter ship because of its unconventional design, which is explained by the interesting lore behind it. Consolidated Outland was founded in Bremen by the so-called rebel trillionaire Silas Corner. Silas was born a millionaire, but instead of sitting on his wealth, he started investing at the age of 16, successfully venturing into jump communication and fish farming. At 22, he became a passionate pilot and began collecting rare ships such as the RSI Zeus, the first commercially available spaceship equipped with the quantum drive. Silas' passion for astronautics led him to found Consolidated Outland, which started quietly by producing decorative kits for the Aurora, Freelancer and F-7A Hornet. This allowed Consolidated Outland to stealthily enter the spacecraft market, leading up to the launch of their first ship, the Mustang. The Mustang was a hit, and the funds from its sales were invested in the development of two new ships: the Pioneer, a large colonization ship, and the Nomad, which continues the company's main goal of providing affordable ship with the cutting-edge design philosophy. Which brings us to what I like about the Nomad. Design. The Nomad is fascinating for several reasons. Its distinctive appearance pays homage to the SP Explorer from Elite Dangerous. In addition, Consolidated Outland set out to create a ship that will stand the test of time through the use of advanced technology and innovative design principles. The cockpit of the Nomad offers clear visibility in all directions, contributing to a highly comfortable piloting experience. It features a weapon hardpoint just beneath the cockpit, simplifying attacks on ground targets, as there's no need to adjust convergence settings for precise aiming. The open cargo hatch may seem odd or even risky due to the exposure of the cargo, but it proves to be extremely practical in everyday use. And to criticize the Nomad for this aspect would be to belittle all existing pickup trucks, so in my opinion, this feature was a well-considered choice. In fact, the open cargo greatly benefits the cargo refactor and salvage gameplay, making the Nomad effortless to load. The landing gear, equipped with passive hover technology, allows the ship to hover even when the power is off. This may seem like an unnecessary detail, but it could prove useful in the future, as it could allow the Nomad to land on softer terrains such as mud or sand without the risk of getting stuck. The engines are also noteworthy. Their size is remarkably small compared to the size of the ship, and they emit a pleasant sound. Finally, it's worth noting that the original RSI transmission above the Nomad included a reference to a size 1 utility mount at the rear of the ship. While there's no big sign of this feature so far, the prospect remains that the Nomad may one day have this capability. All these features reaffirm my belief that the Nomad is a vessel designed to stand the test of time. Flight performance. The Nomad is a pleasure to fly thanks to its smooth and crisp responsiveness. Its acceleration speed and turn rate, while not the best among the starters, are good enough to make it suitable for combat mission against medium-risk targets. The maneuverability of the Nomad is similar to that of medium fighters such as the Hornet and Saber. The small engines do a pretty good job of pushing the considerable mass of the ship, which is nearly 5 times that of the Titan. But you will never feel that much weight because the Nomad just feels like a nimble ship, making everyday errands never feel like a chore. Versatility. To date, the Nomad is the only ship on the official RSI site that identifies exclusively with the starter focus. All other starter ships, such as the 100i, Aurora and Mustang, have an additional focus besides starter. For example, the Mustang Alpha is a starter light cargo. Since starter is not really a class, other sites like UX Corp, DPS Calculator and STAR-YNXP-VBJZ classify the Nomad as light freight. In my opinion, both starter and light freight fall short of giving the Nomad an ideal classification. Labeling the Nomad as a starter is somewhat belittling, as even veteran players will find this ship to be very useful. Light freight is a more reasonable choice, but the Nomad has combat capabilities that are a bit more advanced than other light transports, such as the Mustang Alpha. I think that the right class for the Nomad can be found in the pledge store itself. On the All Ships main page, you can browse ships by classification. The classes in this menu are, in my opinion, the most accurate in the Star Citizen universe. There, the Nomad is listed under the multi-role class. And that's what a Nomad is, a true size 2 multi-role ship that can perform many different activities. With 24 SCU, you can carry decent trades selling high-value commodities, potentially getting profits up to 30,000 USC with a single cargo. The open, retractable cargo makes transporting land vehicles very easy. The Nomad can carry a Cyclone, which makes land mission into enemy bunkers very quick. It can even carry a Ursa, although this is clearly a stretch and not an intended possibility. Delivery missions are fast to complete with the Nomad, and you can even do some mining since it can transport a rock. The Nomad is also a capable fighter that can complete medium-risk target bounties with relative ease, thanks to 3 size 1 shields, decent hull resistance, 3 size 3 weapon hardpoints and 8 size 2 missiles. Higher threats are feasible, but dealing with demanding targets will highlight the limitation of the Nomad in combat scenarios. Its critical parts are quite large and exposed to enemy fire. It has a large cross-section. Its agility is not on par with dedicated fighters, and its weapon capacitor is only slightly larger than that of snap fighter like the Archimede. However, such limitation in combat do not change the fact that the Nomad is a true multi-role ship capable of performing well in many activities. Claim time. The Nomad is one of the fastest ships to claim, which is remarkable considering its versatility and ability to carry ground vehicles such as the Rock and Cyclone. This makes the Nomad a great ship for undertaking planetside activities. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to claim the Nomad, fly to a ground vehicle pad, load the ground vehicle onto it and be ready again. Refined. The Nomad is a refined ship that is very close to the gold standard. If you are not familiar with the concept of gold standard, I suggest you watch my video on the cutter, which I will link to into description. In short, gold standard is when a ship is compatible with all current and upcoming game features, and a big part of that is the ability to access the components of the ship, which the Nomad has. In addition, the Nomad has a pleasant living area furnished like a small apartment. There are even nice little touches like the cool animation of the SS ladder and the retractable chair in the kitchenette. All these elements make the Nomad feel like a polished ship, which to be honest is not very common in Star Citizen. Stock configuration. The Nomad has a pretty good stock configuration that most players will not need to change. It is armed with 3 size 2 gimbaled laser repeaters, 8 size 2 cross-section missiles and the Expedition Quantum Drive, which is very close in performance to the Atlas, a very popular size 1 quantum drive. Having a good stock configuration is an aspect that I personally appreciate, because it keeps the ship useful after a game wipe or whenever the ship reset is introduced after each claim. And also because I'm pretty lazy and tend to make only the most necessary changes to my ships. In fact, the only change I like to make to my Nomad is to install 3 size 3 fixed laser repeaters. Weapon racks. It is easy to overlook the fact that the Nomad has weapon racks. They are placed on either side of the entrance corridor, and while they cannot hold heavy weapons, they are a nice feature to have on a ship that can carry land vehicles. In fact, as of version 3.19, any weapons that were in the weapon racks before the ship was stored will be returned when the ship is claimed, even if the ship is lost or destroyed. This makes the Nomad a great ship for ground missions. And now it's time for the things I don't like about the Nomad. Cargo area. It may sound crazy to include the cargo area of the Nomad in the don't like section. After all, with its 24 SCU, the Nomad has one of the best cargo capacity for its size, second only to the Hull A. The reason I don't like the cargo area is that it looks too small compared to the actual size of the ship, especially considering that it is exposed cargo. A slightly larger area would have been great, especially for transport vehicles. In fact, the Cyclone barely fit into the Nomad, and the new Fury could have been transported with ease. This limits the Nomad in what I think could have been a great role in the game, a size 2 vehicle transporter, and why not in the future even a tow truck. And to make this possible, the Nomad should be able to properly carry vehicles as large as the Ursa. This may sound like a lot of rework, but with some minor changes it will be not a problem. In fact, the Nomad has a strangely oversized wall that separates the cargo area from the living area. I've tried to understand if there's a good reason for this, but frankly I haven't found one. So, by narrowing that wall and widening the cargo area a bit, an Ursa could be loaded with ease. This will make the Nomad an indispensable vehicle, filling an empty niche in the current panorama of available ships, a small vehicle carrier with fast claim time. Accommodations. From a role-playing point of view, some elements of the accommodations of the Nomad make no sense to me. There is no shower, which makes the cozy and refined living area rather pointless, especially since the Nomad is furnished like a small apartment. Given the size of the ship, it would have been no problem to enlarge the bathroom to accommodate a classic shower-toilet combo. Another element that makes no sense to me is finding the toothbrush next to the toilet bowl when even the sink is missing. And finally, the lack of windows in the living area is really a shame, as it would have been sufficient to add a small portal to the cockpit entrance door. Landing gear. I know, in the like section I expressed my appreciation for the landing gear, as it may provide the ability to land in difficult terrain in the future. But honestly, I don't like it for two reasons. First, because it stands out from the general style of Star Citizen, as the Nomad is the only ship with this feature when even alien ships have traditional landing gear. And secondly, every time I see the Nomad hovering in strong wind conditions, a part of me keeps thinking that it should be pulled away by the wind. Hydrogen consumption. The Nomad has a very high hydrogen consumption, and despite having a large hydrogen tank comparable to larger ships like the Freelancer and Cutlass Black, it still has a low estimated flight time. In fact, its hydrogen consumption is even higher than that of the Vanguard, a size 3 military ship, or comparable to that of the Redeemer, a size 4 military ship. This means that flying the Nomad for long periods of time is not cheap. To give you an idea, a full tank of hydrogen for the Nomad costs about 2000 USD for an estimated flight time of only 30 minutes. Mass. This is a lore-oriented observation that has little to do with gameplay, but if you are familiar with my videos, you know that I emphasize lore and immersion. Now, an official description of the Nomad states that it uses a unique alloy throughout its hull. Lore-wise, the use of a special alloy is a hallmark of Consolidated Outland, as the Mustang also uses it to keep weight down. In fact, the Mustang is quite light compared to other ships, which cannot be said for the Nomad, as its mass is comparable to that of the Freelancer, a ship one size larger that can accommodate a crew of 4. This could have been justified by giving the Nomad a very resistant hull, an aspect that would even match the sturdy look of the ship. But if you compare the hull strength of the Nomad with that of the cutter, something doesn't add up, because the cutter has a much stronger hull with only a third of the weight. In my opinion, to be more in line with the lore, the Nomad should be at least half the actual weight, or the hull strength should be increased to match and possibly exceed that of the cutter. Headlights. There is not much to say. The Nomad has weak headlights. This is a shame, because the Nomad has a great view of the cockpit and that it is designed for everyday errands and for venture diverse. Having decent headlights would have been a basic feature. Expensive. Normally, I don't care too much about the real money prices of the ships, since it is possible to buy any ship in-game a patch after its release. But the Nomad is one of the ships sold in a starter pack, so the real money price matters. As you know, a starter pack is required to enter the Star Citizen universe, so the price of starter ships is an important aspect to consider. New players usually buy their starter pack with one of the following criteria: go for the cheapest, go for the best value, or just go for the ship they like. New players looking for the cheapest option will avoid the Nomad, as it sells for $115 as of the date of this video, more than double the price of the cheapest starter pack. New players who want to start the game with ships that don't look or perform like entry-level ships and don't mind spending more are more likely to choose the Cutlass Black or Freelancer. And new players who just buy the ship they like usually don't choose the Nomad, because it's a ship that many find less appealing compared to the other starter ships. So, the Nomad is a ship that is most likely to be chosen by informed new players who don't mind spending a little more and that can appreciate what the ship has to offer. But such new players are quite rare. After all, few people will research every starter ship available before buying one, and honestly, I wasn't one of them, as I just blindly went for the cheapest one. The high price of the Nomad is a big obstacle to making it a more common choice, and that's a shame, because starter ships play a big role in keeping new players into the game, and the Nomad is a ship that will provide a great first experience instead of a Mustang or Aurora. Final verdict. Before we get to the final verdict, don't forget to hit the like button and possibly subscribe. It's an important click that will help the channel and bring you more videos. Thank you very much. Now, the Nomad is the kind of ship that is appreciated by many but loved by just a few. With its fast claim time, good cargo capacity, decent combat capabilities and the ability to carry a medium-sized land vehicle, the Nomad is much more than a starter. It's a great asset to any player. Personally, my reservations lie with the aesthetic design, which in my eyes looks like it doesn't belong in Star Citizen. The homage to Elite's ASP Explorer feels less like a nod of respect and more like a borrowed aesthetic. As I said, I'm also not a fan of the floating landing gear, which reminds me more of the ship hovering bug than an intentional feature. Finally, my understanding of the lore behind the Nomad seems to contradict the final product. The CEO of Consolidated Outland is said to have personally overseen the development of the ship with an obsessive attention to detail. The vision was for an innovative multi-purpose ship for adventuring across the verse, but the actual design of the Nomad doesn't seem to fit. Its large living area suggests a ship designed to enjoy adventuring in the verse, but the lack of a shower and significant hydrogen consumption seem to undermine this possibility. Furthermore, the considerable mass of the ship seems inconsistent with the use of advanced lightweight alloys, for which Consolidated Outland is known. Taking all the positives and negatives into consideration, my final verdict on the Nomad is 8 out of 10. The Nomad may not be pretty, but it's a great ship that any player will find useful. Its fast claim time, unmatched versatility for its size and refined aesthetic make the Nomad one of the best ships in Star Citizen. The starter classification does not do this ship justice, as it leads many to see the Nomad as an overpriced Size 2 starter, which it is not. The Nomad is simply the best Size 2 ship for planet-side activities. The main reason it doesn't score higher are untapped potential and a ship design that doesn't seem to take into account the lore that created it. I'm referring to the lack of a shower, the high hydrogen consumption and the enormous mass of the ship. The untapped potential lies in the cargo bay, that is too small to make the Nomad a true Size 2 vehicle transporter, which will fill a much needed niche in the landscape of currently available Size 2 ships. As I showed in the previous section, it will take some minor modification to allow the Nomad to properly carry vehicles the size of an Ursa. And why not, even a Fury? This will make the Nomad even more of a must-have ship than it already is. In the next episode, the Titan. Can you guess what I like and what I don't? Until next time, see you in the verse.